Flying private costs $80,000 from New York to LA. If your first reaction is, that's insane, this video is for you. If your first reaction is, that doesn't sound too bad, this video is really for you. Most people think private aviation's a billionaire's thing. They're wrong. But the majority of people that can't afford it have the math wrong. They're asking the wrong questions, they have the wrong math, and the reality is they're either spending money they shouldn't or they're leaving behind money that they wish they would have spent. So here's what we're gonna cover. In the next 10 minutes, I'm gonna share with you the exact numbers behind flying private, who it makes sense for and who it doesn't. And we're gonna look at the 3 most common ways to fly private: chartering, jet card, or going out and buying a jet. Once we talk about the numbers, we're gonna talk about the benefits. And these benefits, they have nothing to do about financial outcomes. They're all the intangible benefits that come with flying private. But when we think about those benefits, there also comes with costs. I'm gonna reveal to you the one cost that has nothing to do with dollars that you have to be thinking about if you're gonna be flying private. It's the one thing that I warn clients about as they go down the path of flying private. And that's gonna lead us to the framework that I use with the clients that we work with at Moment Private Wealth to decide, is flying private something that fits inside their financial picture? Let's dive in. Now, most of these conversations start with, what's the cost? And although cost is a determining factor, it shouldn't be the end all be all. Whenever we're thinking about cost, we always break it down into the 3 ways that you can fly private. Because the reality is, whenever you're flying private, depending on how you're flying could largely determine the overall cost of flying private. Is it a one-time expense? Is there ongoing expenses? Is there a big down payment you have to put down? All these are factors that you need to be thinking about when you're flying private. So what are the 3 ways that you're typically gonna see private aviation come into play for families? The first is looking at chartering. Think about chartering as the lowest commitment way to get into the private aviation game. You decide you're gonna take your family on a vacation from St. Louis to Cabo. I live in St. Louis, Missouri, and there are no direct flights to Cabo. It is a complete pain to get to. And you say, this is a once in a lifetime vacation, we wanna charter. So we're gonna fly private. So we're gonna have a direct flight from St. Louis all the way down to Cabo. And when you're chartering, you're gonna have a cost per hour. Typically, this is gonna range somewhere between $8,000, $14,000 an hour. It can range upwards of $20,000 or $30,000 an hour if you're on a really big or heavy jet. But for the sake of the conversation today, let's assume it's somewhere in that $8,000 to $14,000 an hour range. So you can pretty easily calculate what that's going to look like based on the amount of time that you're going to be actually flying in the air. So if you're going on a trip and you're thinking about what is that actually going to cost to charter a plane, think about it as the amount of time from wheels up to wheels down, and apply those ranges that I just mentioned, that $8,000 to $14,000 per hour. Now, why would somebody charter versus getting a jet card? Well, there's very low commitment, right? You want to go on that vacation and you decide that we're just going to dip our toe in the water from a private aviation standpoint. This is a great way to dip our toe in the water. Now, if you start to fly with a charter and you realize, I'm really loving flying private, I want to do this more frequently, it's going to make sense to ramp up to a jet card. Because whenever you start to have more and more commitment to flying private, the cost that you're going to have per hour is going to go down when we jump into a jet card. And that jet card, as I highlighted here, it's the most common because think about it as the middle ground. We're going to get to reduce our hourly costs, typically somewhere between $6,000 and $9,000 an hour. But we're going to have this upfront cost that we're going to incur because we're going to have to put down $250,000, maybe $500,000 into a jet card. Think about it like a really fancy gift card that you bought. Then you're going to have to utilize it over the course of a certain number of months or years. And the biggest benefit here is the convenience factor. So when you go to charter a plane, you're going to have to find that plane that you're going to charter. It's got to be available. The crew's got to be available on the dates that you're going. That's why the cost per hour is going to be higher when you're doing that one-time charter. But on these jet cards, it's going to reduce the overall hourly rate that you're going to be paying. But this is truly for somebody who's gone beyond dipping their toe in the water and they know that they want to continue flying private on a more regular basis. But they haven't put themselves in a situation that they're going to go all in and they're going to buy their own plane. And now, when we think about people who are going to be buying their own plane, the biggest thing that I'm thinking about is the number of hours that we're going to be flying and can we afford it? When we think about the number of hours that we're going to be flying, if we're flying anywhere under 100 hours, it does not make sense to buy. If we're doing anything over 200 hours, it normally makes sense to look at potential ownership. But when you think about ownership, money cannot be a factor. We're going to be paying millions of dollars for a plane, and then normally you're going to have $1 million to $3 million of cost throughout the course of the year. And when we think about ownership, there are some benefits, right? People talk about the tax benefits. You can write the entire jet off. This can be a huge benefit from a business owner perspective, but there's a huge amount of cost. We do not want to go spend millions of dollars a year, potentially tens of millions of dollars on a plane simply to get a tax write-off. But if we're flying hundreds of hours a year for our company, it could make sense to pull the trigger on the ownership. So those are the three ways that you could fly private and exactly what those costs look like. Now, there's a wide range here. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars up to millions of dollars. But the amazing thing is about flying private, all of these give you the same types of benefits. What are those benefits? Let me share them with you. I get to see this all the time with the clients that we work with at Moment. The number one benefit that I see for clients that we work with, and folks just generally in private aviation, is convenience. And when we think about convenience, I think about it in terms of two areas. Number one is our time convenience. When you think about flying on a commercial airliner, you're going to have to drive to the airport, you're going to park at the airport, you're going to go through TSA, you're potentially going to check your bag, you're going to go to the gate, you're going to have to get there early because the flight is leaving on time with or without you. Then you're going to fly, you're going to get your bags. There's a lot that goes into that entire process. It's not just wheels up to wheels down. So when you think about the time comparison of flying commercial versus the time comparison of flying private, it's roughly half the amount of time because you're able to drive straight to the airport, out on the tarmac, you get your bags out, put your bags on the plane, and you take off. When you land, your bags come out, there's going to be a car waiting for you, put your bags in the car, go to your location. So it's going to save you 50% of the travel time. Now, when I think about 50% of the travel time, a lot of people like to say, well, my time's really, really expensive. But for that math to make sense, your time needs to be really expensive. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars per hour expensive. And there's people that makes a lot of sense for. But the vast majority of Americans, even entrepreneurs that are really successful, it doesn't make sense. And when I think about the time component, yes, you need to understand what is your time cost, but that's very rarely the name of the game. The most likely situation from a convenience factor is that you own a business and you're flying into locations that are very hard to get to. We work with a family where they are flying to all these small town locations all across the United States. They are impossible to get to. They would have to fly into a major hub, drive 90 minutes in a car, drive 90 minutes back, get on the plane, fly back home, and it increases their travel time by multiples, 2 or 3x. And they're flying their entire team there. And so from a convenience factor, that can start to make a lot of sense. And this could be applicable to all three of the ways to fly private that I mentioned before. You don't have to dive headfirst in and buy a jet. Start with chartering, go to the jet card, and then potentially that ownership piece. When we think about the other benefits of flying private, one of the most common ones that come up is as a business tool. And when I think about it as a business tool, there's two primary tools that I think about. Number one is entertaining clients. And when I think about entertaining clients, you really need to be in a business that this is an expectation. It needs to be normal for the business that you are in to entertain clients and have them be flying private. I think the reality is that for a lot of businesses, they underestimate that it could be a huge negative to flying private. For example, if one of our vendors called me and they said, Luke, we really appreciate the relationship that we have with Moment. We'd like to fly you on a private jet down to Miami, and we want to do X, Y, and Z with you. Would you like to come? My first reaction would be, am I overpaying that vendor? And that might just be for me, but I think that's something that a lot of business owners need to be aware of is if you're not in the space of flying private, a lot of times you think that flying private could be this huge unlock from a business development standpoint, from an entertainment standpoint with current clients. But I think it's a tool that you need to be very careful with. But if you're in an industry that's expected, it can be an amazing opportunity to be able to utilize that tool. I would encourage you to tread lightly because depending on who you're taking on that plane, it could actually have negative effects. And the last piece is thinking about if you have a family. And when I think about my own family, I have 3 kids. That would be an amazing unlock. But is it an unlock that's worth $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 an hour? For me, it's not. For other folks, it is. This cost that's not on an invoice is the cost that it could potentially have on your kids by flying private with them. And I've seen it go both ways. I've seen kids grow up flying private and then be in a situation that they understand their parents put in a lot of hard work and that allowed their family to fly private. And once they grow up, they get out of college, they fly commercial, just like 99% of us. But I've also seen it go the other way, where flying private set this expectation that that's just what we do. And it set a poor expectation because those kids, as they grew up, they didn't realize the amount of work, the amount of effort it took to be in a situation that they could fly private. So if you are looking at flying private, I would encourage you to just be aware of this. And I think there's no perfect formula to it. And I think a big factor is just your kids in general. How do you think your kids are going to be affected? You know your kids better than anybody else. So I'd encourage you to think long and hard about that before you start putting them on a private jet and flying them private. Because once you go down that path, it's very hard to go back. Now, who should be doing this and who shouldn't be doing this? I was talking to a friend, not a customer, the other day, and we were talking a little bit about flying private, and he was talking about the cost of it. He made this comment. He said, well, Luke, I would never fly private because if it costs $150,000 to fly round trip to the location that I'm going to, if I were to invest that money at a 7% interest rate, it's going to give me $580,000 over the course of the next couple decades. And when I looked at him and I said, that means that you should not take that trip. If you're doing those math calculations, it's a good indicator that you probably can't afford to fly private. And if you are doing those calculations, the only channel that I would look at is potentially chartering. Maybe you're going on a once in a lifetime vacation and you want to fly private. There's nothing wrong with that. As I think about flying private and doing it in a way that you're chartering, it's a one-time expense. So if we're looking at any big one-time expenses, whether it's a vacation or whether it's just the actual flight itself, you just need to bake it in your budget. Does it align with our basics? What is our income? What are our expenses? And what are we trying to save throughout the course of the year? If we can hit our savings goal that aligns with our financial plan by doing that one-time charter, I would say go for it. But do not do it at the detriment of your financial plan. Now, the other folks that we're looking at flying private for are going to be the jet cards and looking at buying. Who should be utilizing a jet card? The folks that be using a jet card are the ones that feel really strongly about private aviation. They've decided, they've done a couple charters, they've decided we really want to fly private. But we don't want to dive headfirst into ownership, either from the standpoint of we're not flying enough hours or we don't have the funds. We don't have the financial capacity to go out, buy a plane, and be able to afford the maintenance on that plane. And a jet card could be a really good option. Similar to option number one with the chartering, I would say bake this into your budget because we're talking about a potentially $250,000, $500,000 expense. This goes back to the basics. What is our income? What are our expenses? And are we in a situation that we can hit our savings goal while still adding this expense in? Now, what I would encourage you to think about is, am I going to be flying private permanently, or is this just a stage of life that we're in? Because if you are going to be flying private permanently, even in that jet card, that middle column, you're going to be in a position that you're going to have to save significantly more money for retirement to be able to afford this new lifestyle cost that you've incurred. Because for a lot of families, I see them spending $10,000 to $20,000 a month on their lifestyle expenses. And if we're talking about adding a jet card, we might be talking about doubling or even tripling our lifestyle spend just on flying alone, which could be 100% fine, but make sure you're baking that into what the long-term plan is. And then the last piece is ownership. Who should be buying a plane? For the folks that are buying a plane, I have two rules of thumb. Number one is, can you write it off in your business? So what that means is that if you buy a plane, you can write off 100% of it in year one. You buy a $10 million plane, you get a $10 million tax deduction. It can be an amazing financial outcome. But when you actually run the numbers, you look at everything behind the scenes, it is not a good financial decision. And if you're trying to buy a plane, do not try to do financial engineering. There is no way to make the math make sense. It's a great luxury, and if you can afford to do it, great. I would also encourage you to be thinking about the number of hours that you're going to be flying. Typically, if you're going to be buying a plane, that plane needs to be in the air 200 to 300 hours a year to be in a situation that makes sense. Now, if we do some quick basic math here, if you're flying 300 hours a year, that means that you're flying 150 days, 2 hours in the air. That is a lot of days. That's every other day you are on that airplane flying it. And so when we think about ownership, that's why a lot of businesses, it could potentially make sense if they have other members of their team, not just themselves, flying on that plane on a regular basis. So we've covered it all today. We've covered the real cost. We've covered the benefits. We've covered who should be doing this and who should be flying private, and that number one cost that no one talks about. Now, what should you do with this information? I would encourage you, digest it, think about it. And if you have questions, schedule a call below. We talk about this with a lot of the entrepreneurs that we work with at Moment Private Wealth. And if you have questions around private aviation and are not sure how to bake it into the long-term or the short-term plan, reach out to us. Happy to have a conversation around it. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. We're going to be putting out more and more content just like this for entrepreneurs.